You wouldn't likely know today, but Pelican Island down in Galveston has quite the unique history. When European settlers first arrived in this area around 1815, the island was not much more than a marshy sandbar with a shell bank collecting silt. Prior to the Texas Revolution, these islands were controlled by the Mexican government. However, they became the property of the Republic of Texas in April of 1836 and were annexed into the United States in December of 1845. In 1856, the state of Texas deeded the island to the city of Galveston. The city of Galveston would take more than 16 years before they would record the deed with the county clerk's office. In 1859, the federal government would begin construction of a fort on the island. However, construction would be incomplete when hostilities would break out for the U.S. Civil War. The Confederate military would finish the fort in 1860, and the Union would regain control of the fort just 2 years later. In the early 1870s, the first efforts to establish a maritime industry in Galveston would begin. The Texas State Senate incorporated the Galveston Dry Dock Company. However, contract negotiations for a lease on Pelican Island were not successful. During this period of time, efforts to dredge this area through here began, and also efforts to raise parts of the island to make it more suitable for construction. In the 1880s, the federal government would establish the first quarantine station on the island. This would be one of several different immigration facilities that would be here over the years, but this facility was ultimately lost during the storm of 1900. In 1906, the federal government would build the Pelican Island Immigration Station. This facility would have been in this area here around present-day Seawolf Park. This was an incredibly busy port of entry during this period of time, where it is estimated that they took in roughly 50,000 people a year. In fact, my own great-grandfather came through this port of entry when he immigrated to the United States from Germany. And if there's any fans of the Yellowstone in 1883 series, whenever Spencer Dutton returns to the United States and comes through Galveston, the show is likely depicting this facility right here during that scene. In 1908, J.L. Budworth entered into a contract with the city of Galveston for 400 feet of waterfront for a shipyard, which I believe would have been in this area right here. In 1922, the SS Selma would come to its final resting place just off the eastern edge of the island here. However, we'll get more into that just in a few. In 1923, the city of Galveston had a bond proposal that was going to build the causeway from Galveston onto Pelican Island. However, that would fail when it was voted on by Galveston voters. It would not be until several decades later in 1954 that this would again be put up for a bond and finally pass. Here we have 1954, and you can see that there is no causeway there. But moving forward to 1969, and we have a causeway. In 1965, a prominent businessman named George Mitchell gave 100 acres of land on Pelican Island for the establishment of the Texas Maritime Academy, which is known today as Texas A&M University at Galveston. And in 1974, you can see some construction taking place out there, but by 1987, you have a school. And going backwards just a touch, in 1955, Congress passed a directive to set aside parkland for honor of naval vessels that were lost during World War II. The USS Seawolf was a submarine that was lost in 1944, and unfortunately was likely the result of friendly fire. By 1974, the immigration station, or what was left of it, is gone. Seawolf Park is there, and both of the naval vessels that call Seawolf Park home have been transferred. This vessel right here is the USS Cavallo. The Cavallo is a Gato-class submarine, I hope I'm saying that right, that was actually responsible for sinking the Japanese carrier the Shokaku during World War II. The Cavallo was transferred to Seawolf Park in 1971. This other ship right here is the USS Stewart. The Stewart is an Edsel-class destroyer escort that was actually built at the Brown Shipyard in Houston. It was transferred to Seawolf Park in 1974. And we're going to move forward to 1990. And what was so cool is in the Todd Shipyard, we have the first trip of the Battleship Texas as a museum ship to Galveston. The Texas has come to Galveston one time before that I know of in 1914 while it was in service. And those of you that are familiar with the battleship Texas know that in 2022 the ship traveled to Galveston again for additional repairs. Here it is in dry dock again in almost the exact same place. And then it is still there today. It's no longer in the dry dock. The hull repairs have been completed. They're still working on some other things, including a new wooden deck. But the battleship Texas is one of the oldest museum battleships in existence, and its trips to Galveston were really the first of their kind for preserving historic naval ships like that. So it was very cool to see this. Then back over here is the SS Selma. The Selma was one of about a dozen ships of its kind. It was produced, the Woodrow Wilson administration, and it was a merchant oil tanker that was produced under the administration because of a steel shortage, and it was an experiment to see if concrete-hulled ships were a feasible idea. This ship was launched June 28, 1919, which is the very same day that the German government signed the Treaty of Versailles. So the ship did not go into service to support military operations, but instead went into service in the Gulf of Mexico. It was about 7,500 tons and about 425 feet long. And on May 30th, 1920, the ship would run aground on a jetty off the coast of Tampico, Mexico. The jetty would gash the hull of the ship by about 60 feet. The ship was towed back to Galveston, where repairs were attempted but unsuccessful. The ship was scuttled off of Pier 10, which I'm not sure which one of these docks that would have been at the time, but it was a difficult object to move around in the water, so it was later moved off the coast of Pelican Island here. But as far back as we have satellite imagery for, the Selma is here. This is 1954, and then 1990, 2004, and 2023, and 2025. There have been some researchers and some scientists at A&M Galveston that have talked over the years about the Selma reaching a point of complete deterioration and no longer being visible. However, it's been over 100 years and the Selma is still going strong here off the coast. But yeah, very interesting piece of history for a piece of land that is not a whole lot to look at today.